It is 8:32. We have all but two members here, one of whom will be absent. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at 8:32. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation on Thursday, September 19th. If you would all rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Sort of by mutual consensus, we're going to defer the appointment of a clerk to the next BET meeting. I would take, because we have a time constraint, I would take a motion to move number 3, number 6, and number 7, the various reports, to be after new business. Second?
Second.
Anybody object? Okay. We're going to start, since Amina did make it on time, we're going to start with number 4, executive session. So I'd take a motion to move into executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Selps and Moriarty. Joan, you can stay. Yeah. You get to stay now. All in favor? Aye. So we move into executive session at 8:34.
Consider appropriation SE1 for the law department for $17,274 settlement, and that we move it up and handle that now while our town attorney, assistant town attorney Amin Ahmad is with the board.
Seconded by Mr. Selps, moved by Ms. Tarkington to move SE1 up to be taken currently.
Can I make one further comment?
Yeah, as soon as we approve the motion. Well, actually, no, we've got the motion on the floor. Go ahead.
So my further comment is
Commenting on moving?
what should SE1, is it SE1? Is it law department? How do we handle this? Is this appropriately numbered?
No, the comment that I made to Ms. Tarkington was that typically when we have settlements, it comes from the first selectman,
Right.
as indicated on our agenda as the department,
Right.
as opposed to law department. But this is a minor detail how it's reflected here, but
Usually it is.
Okay, so I'll accept the motion subject to alteration of the identifying code, which can be adjusted later. Anybody opposed to moving it? Seeing none, we will take up SE1, the law department, a settlement for $17,274, State Farm Mutual Auto Insurance versus the town of Greenwich Romano. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, is there any opposition to this item? Seeing none, vote is 11-0-0. What's that?
Okay, we voted to move it separately, okay.
Yes, right. Okay, thank you, Amina. We appreciate your attendance early in the morning. Okay, so we will now go to the request for budget adjustments. I failed to note that Barbara Schellenberg's on the line in case we need her later on, but she was also here for the executive session.
So shall I move the routine items?
Would you like to? I was going to read them. I was sort of acting as clerk today, so.
So I'll just read I move the routine applications. HD2 for the health department, approval to use a PHEP grant for $34,000. PD1 for the police department, approval to use $35,000. PW1 for the Department of Public Works. This is an additional appropriation and approval to use $799,200, and this is just for grant traffic signals. This is a new appropriation at Railroad Avenue. And finally, PW3 for the Department of Public Works, release of conditions for the Fairfield Road Bridge, $250,000.
Could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Moved by Leslie Tarkington, seconded by Leslie Moriarty. The four routine applications. The report of the Budget Committee, perhaps?
We don't normally give a
Okay, we
report on
don't.
routine.
I get confused. So.
Happy to do it, but I don't think it's, if you want it.
No, I don't think it's necessary. Does anybody have any questions or discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to passing unanimously? Seeing none, this passes 11-0-0. Okay, we'll move on to non-routine applications. You want to read them or shall I?
I think I do as the budget chair.
Okay.
So our first item is PW 10 for the Department of Public Works. It's approval to use for the, it's release of conditions, actually, rather than approval to use for Greenwich Avenue ADA, $450,000.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a motion by you.
That's correct, I move it.
Okay.
And I'll
didn't get that
second.
actual word.
And I'll second.
Okay, Leslie Tarkington moves, Leslie Moriarty seconds.
So now I need to, on this one, I do need to find a report. So it's going to take me just a little second here because the Budget Committee actually approved this in June. So I'm going to go back to the June minutes. This is, again, $450,000, release of conditions on Greenwich Avenue for ADA improvements. The Commissioner of Public Works, Amy Siebert, presented this request to release conditions on the Greenwich Avenue ADA Improvement Project funding. She recapped the May 30th, 2024 public hearing, including design elements, parking space impact, consideration of side street ADA spaces, reuse of removed parking meter bases, and the functionality versus aesthetics of the proposed intersection bump outs. There was discussion about compliance with the latest ADA regulations, the proposed 19 accessible spaces on Greenwich Avenue itself, tree well sizing and trip hazards, additional lighting, and risk management. And again, as I said before, this was voted 301 within the Budget Committee to recommend the release of conditions with a request, which I believe was provided, for updated numbers on the total Greenwich Avenue parking spaces minus the seasonal no dining spaces, and it was moved as a non-routine item, and that motion carried.
Any other committees take this up? Okay, just for the benefit of the public, I'm also going to note that this also came before the July meeting of the BET, at which meeting it was postponed, looking for an opinion from the law department in regard to whether or not there were requirements of ADA, and specifically whether we were protected under safe harbor. The law department was unable to find an attorney, local attorney who had expertise in ADA work, but was able on multiple recommendations to find a consulting firm in Chicago that actually does work in Connecticut on ADA matters and has worked for WESCOG, the Western Conference of Governments, I think it's called. And so we have that report. It's in the packet. If anybody wants to go to the web, they can find the BET packet for today. As I mentioned, because there's been some questions, as I mentioned, Barbara's on the phone, and I would just like a perspective from you, Barbara. Was there any substantial difference between this report and what we would have gotten in an opinion, either plus or minus?
No, I think this report more than adequately addresses the issue. I think it's very straightforward, and this is somebody who certainly was competent to analyze this issue and reach the conclusions that he did.
Okay. Is there any discussion or questions? Leslie Tarkenton.
So first, I will make a comment, and I'll make one later. While this is being regarded as a legal opinion, it was not, and I asked Mr. Selps, not really, it wasn't considered as a legal opinion and voted upon in the law committee. So normally, when we get anything that's being considered a legal opinion, it would be something that's reviewed as such and then approved and reviewed by the law committee. Is that right, Mr. Soaps?
Mr. Soaps,
That's certainly been historical practice, but as Barbara Schoenberg...
turn your microphone on.
I'm sorry. I agree with that, Ms. Tarkenton, but as Ms. Schellenberg said, this is the functional equivalent of an opinion, and I mean, I'm going to ask the chair for an opportunity to address this issue, but the answer is, I believe this is the functional equivalent of an opinion.
Well, that was not my question, Mr. Selps. My question was, you know, if it is being regarded as an opinion, which, you know, the town attorney has said it is, under normal circumstances, an opinion would be reviewed by the law committee, and there would be a committee report coming out of the law committee on that opinion. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in this instance, we literally, the town attorney had gotten this report, I think, one day prior to that law committee meeting. And so, in particular, Ms. Vassilotis felt that she had not had enough time to review it, and so we did not take it up. That's correct.
And so I'd just like to add that I was attending the law committee meeting, and the opinion, at least to me, was delivered during that meeting, not prior to it. So it wouldn't be possible to ask questions. It wouldn't be for me. I'm not that quick a learner on something like this. Also, I have some comments from Ms. Vassilotis on this. Is it appropriate to read it at this time? Not as a law. I think they're her comments as a individual. First, you might ask Ms. Vassilotis. I know she's having a medical appointment, but you might ask on the line, is she available so she could call in? And if not, I would like to read her.
Why don't you go ahead and read
Well,
which
should we
one?
ask Ms. Vassilotis first if she's available? I think that's appropriate.
You can try, yeah.
Ms. Vassilotis, are you available to read this? Okay. So apparently she's not responding?
Right.
So these are some comments that Ms. Vassilotis sent. According to the latest public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, or PROAG, resurfacing requires a municipality to provide ramps at crosswalks. Ramps currently exist at the crosswalks. The guidelines further provide that if the existing curb ramp meets the appropriate accessibility standard that was in place at the time it was newly constructed or last altered, the curb ramp does not have to be modified to comply with the requirements of the 2010 standards, see the Q&A below, and I can address that a little later. No one can answer the question as to whether the curb ramps on Greenwich Avenue meet the 1991 or 2010 standards, the only one the DPW was willing to commit to not being in compliance with the 1991 or 2010 standards is the crosswalk at the top of Greenwich Avenue on the post road, close paren. DPW cites the lack of records and have been unwilling or unable to commit to whether these crosswalks meet the 1991 or 2010 standards. How can this be possible? The question must also be asked, if the curbs are not in compliance with the 1991 or 2010, whenever the curbs were first installed, close paren, why did DPW spend literally millions of dollars to put in non-compliant ramps? The consultant's report concludes that based on one client that they did work for in which the majority of curb cuts were not in compliance, it is likely that those on Greenwich Avenue are likely not in compliance. This is the justification being used by DPW to alter the curb cuts. There appears to be inconsistent policy by DPW on the replacement of curb ramps. For example, there is currently a replacement of a sidewalk on Millbank Avenue by Lenox Avenue that is ongoing. The entire sidewalk has been removed, but the curbs, which have ramps, have not been touched. Is this curb in compliance with the 1991 or 2010 standards? If so, how was the determination been made? If not, will they be brought up to standard, and when will that occur? No one is denying that accessibility for the disabled is both necessary and required. However, there seems to be inconsistency with the opinion that was given and the requirements for Greenwich Avenue. While many have stated the report is, quote, straightforward, close quote, and alterations are, quote, required, close quote, without knowing a key factor, e.g., whether the safe harbor applies, close paren, this is far from straightforward. By DPW's account, every crosswalk in Greenwich will need to be replaced because the records do not exist to show whether all crosswalks are in compliance with the 1991 or 2010 standards. And Ms. Fasciolotis, as I said, she had, there was a question here, and then she's kind of added some color, which I said I would read later. She said, when the department adopted its revised Title II ADA regulations, including the updated ADA standards for accessible design, 2010 standards as defined in 28 CFR 35.151, it specified that elements that have not been altered in existing facilities on or after March 15, 2012, and that comply with the corresponding technical and scoping specifications for those elements is either the 1991 standards or in the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards, UFAS. Are not required to be modified in order to comply with the requirements set forth in 2010 standards. And this goes on, citing another section. As a result of this, quote, safe harbor, close quote, provision, if a curb ramp was built or altered prior to March 15, 2012, and complies with the requirements for curb ramps in either the 1991 ADA standards for accessible design, and this goes on, and I've just asked that this entire memo be made part of as an attachment to the minutes, because I think there's a lot of details here that none of us can just understand by reading this or hearing it for the first time. So at this point, I think my own opinion is that our standard, our process is for something, a legal opinion to be reviewed by the law committee and their vote be provided and their report be provided. And that has not occurred. So I would ask that this be moved to either the next meeting or a special meeting so that that review by the law committee can take place.
In regard to the minutes, we're trying to adhere to the standards of Robert's rules, which do not usually have discussions entered into the minutes. It would just note that it was discussed. But if you want to send that to the entire board, I think that would be fine.
Okay, I'll do that when I have a minute, since I have other reports to give.
Okay. And you've made a request to postpone it, but
For either, a special meeting or a, the next meeting, whatever the chair would choose to do, in order to give it the opportunity for the law committee to review it. Also, I, in a conversation yesterday with, or last evening with our town attorney, she did indicate that the author of this opinion was available for a meeting earlier this week, but wasn't available today, and it might be appropriate that he be available for questions either at the law committee or at our next board meeting, whatever you would think would be appropriate. If, you know, again, I think that's correct, right, Attorney Schellenberg, that you did offer that?
Yes.
Okay, the indication is yes. All right, I think at this point it'd be appropriate to recognize Mr. Selps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed the American with Disabilities Act into law, banning discrimination against people with disabilities and requiring reasonable accommodations in schools, transportation, and other areas of public life. The ADA has been called the most sweeping anti-discrimination measure since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The law makes explicit the rights of those, not just those who are born with a disability, but those who experience temporary disability. The accommodations it secured became useful to everyone, not just those born with disability. Anyone who has pushed a stroller or pulled a suitcase has benefited from the ramps required by the ADA for wheelchair users. Anyone who's watched a video in a noisy subway car has benefited from closed captioning intended for those who cannot hear. And anyone who's had a complicated pregnancy would also stood to benefit from the ADA. ADA requires newly designed and constructed or altered state and local government facilities and public accommodations to be readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities. That's Title II of the ADA, referred to in Ms. Fasleota's comments. The ADA directed the Justice Department to issue regulations to implement the statute, and those became the 1991 and 2012 guidelines, again referred to by Ms. Fasleota in her remarks. Under the ADA guidelines, the town's sidewalks, including the curb cuts, qualify as a facility that must be maintained in accordance with the guidelines. The decision to repave Greenwich Avenue is similarly a program that must qualify under the regulations. This is not the first time that the issue of whether curb cuts must comply with the ADA in connection with the repaving program. In the WT Grant report, the report cites the case of Kinney versus Jerusalem, in which a plaintiff alleged that the city of Philadelphia had repaved its streets and failed to install curb cuts. One of the defenses that was raised by the city of Philadelphia was that its prior curb cuts were compliant. In that case, the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit held that Philadelphia's repaving plan was an alteration that had to satisfy ADA requirements and that the grandfathering provisions were not applicable. Here, as part of the fiscal year 2025 budget, the BET approved $450,000 for the repaving of Greenwich Avenue, subject to a condition that the DPW hold a public meeting and solicit community input on its plan design. That public hearing was held in late May of this year. Subsequent to that meeting, the BT has considered the question of whether the condition was satisfied. At the most recent meeting, various objections were raised, including the argument that the curb cuts on Greenwich Avenue did not need to be made ADA compliant because they were grandfathered in. That was a new basis for the opposition, and it really only arose at the time of the July meeting. Subsequently, the law department engaged WT Group, a firm that advises state and local governments on ADA compliance. Its mandate was to advise on whether the ADA compliance was required in connection with the repaving program. I disagree strenuously with the conclusions that my colleague, Ms. Fasleotis, has asserted. I've read this, I've read the legislative history, I've read the cases cited in the WT Group's report. WT Group's unambiguous conclusion was that the repaving program was an alteration that required ADA compliance and that the grandfather provisions of prior regulations were not applicable. The decision today, which I hope we reach, has two primary components. The town must meet its legal obligations, and beyond that, there's a moral question involved, how we treat our members of our community who are burdened by disability. I believe WT Group's report provides conclusive guidance on the legal issue, but we must still address the moral issue. Even if compliance were not required, the issue is whether the town would or should be satisfied in relying on a regulatory escape hatch, or whether it should take affirmative action, whether or not required, to promote inclusivity and access to all of our citizens. We've talked about this at length in prior meetings. Greenwich Avenue is the spine of our community. People work, live, shop, stroll, and eat at its many stores, restaurants, and other facilities. We are justly proud of its many wonderful opportunities it offers to residents and visitors. We would be sending a terrible message to our community if we relied on exceptions to the ADA regulations to evade our moral responsibilities. And if we did so, we also expose our town to clear legal risk. The Justice Department has the authority to enforce the ADA. Any person who believes he or she has been harmed by a violation of the ADA can file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. That's not new, and in fact, it's happened in Greenwich before. The department then investigates, and if necessary, can commence legal action. As I think many of you know, several years ago, a complaint was filed with the Office of Civil Rights regarding ADA access at Old Greenwich School. The result was that the town entered into a consent decree with the Office of Civil Rights requiring the town to promptly remediate the ADA violations at Old Greenwich School. And beyond that, the town was required to submit its plans for the renovation of Old Greenwich School to the Justice Department so that it was independently satisfied that those renovations satisfied ADA. Happily, because the plans for that project were ADA compliant, the DOJ approved them. If the DOJ received a complaint about ADA compliance with the Greenwich Avenue project, it could take similar action. Moreover, and I want to stress this point, the DOJ would not be limited to investigating the Greenwich Avenue project. It could examine ADA compliance in the schools, our parks, and other sidewalks and street crossings. Thus, I think there are three reasons here to approve the lifting of these conditions. I believe, and I disagree with Ms. Vasiliotis, I believe, based on the advice from the WT Group, the town is legally required to do so. Secondly, and I want to emphasize this point again, it's the right thing to do for our community, irrespective of our legal obligations. And third, as I indicated, failure to make the right decision exposes our town to foreseeable legal risk and the concomitant risk of adverse publicity. I urge my colleagues, as strenuously as I can, to approve lifting the conditions and allowing the Department of Works to complete this project as planned. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Before I recognize Ms. Tarkenton, anybody else care to speak? Mr. Weisbrod?
Yeah, I think this matter has been discussed, debated for many meetings at this point. I'd like to call the motion, have the vote.
Well, we have one more speaker, Mr. Weisbrod, if you withdraw that request. Ms. Tarkenton?
Oh, yes. Well, first, I already asked that the vote on this be deferred until after
gonna
there's a
deal
law
with
law committee meeting. However, I would also comment that all of Mr. Selp's comments deserve the kind of discussion in the law committee so that there is the kind of discussion that I normally hear between Mr. Selps and Ms. Vasiliotis. And while Ms. Vasiliotis provided this statement that I read, Ms. Vasiliotis is not here to provide further comment on Mr. Selp's notes. Again, Ms. Vasiliotis, this was always noted as a difficult date for her, and she's at a medical appointment. So I think this is a very uncomfortable situation for us as BET members.
Ms. Moriarty?
I understand that everybody, has may have different opinions on this particular thing, but the law committee had 10 days. They received this report 10 days ago. They could have set up a meeting before this. They knew it was going to be on the September agenda, so I'm not sure if that was even attempted. So as a matter of process, while typically I think we all are very sensitive to letting all the opinions be aired before we vote on things, this has been to our board 3 times. This is the 3rd time it's here, and I think it deserves action today.
Ms. Aurora?
I just wanted to share a little bit of a different perspective and just repeat kind of the conversation to kind of respond to Stevens. I know this was not a one-sided issue, and I wanted to just share the other perspective of what the concerns were that were raised, with why this was not approved back in July. So specifically, there was a public hearing where several members had concerns with particular bump outs, but specifically the one at the top of the avenue where, although there are technically 2 lanes, it appears as if a single lane is being created, which could, potentially create a bottleneck. And then there were certain vendors and retailers that had particular issues with certain bump outs. I also had shared the story of my closest friend, who is my neighbor in Greenwich, who uses a scooter for mobility devices, for mobility. And I travel with her often in different cities. I go on vacation with her. We're family friends. And I asked her to walk the avenue with me from top to bottom and give her perspective. And she, one of the things she mentioned was, some of the low-hanging fruit of not having Greenwich Avenue be accessible. For example, certain retailers don't have ramps going onto the sidewalk or not being addressed by the solution. Conversely, some of the bump outs, she also uses a cane for short distances and make her life more difficult to traverse. But she also mentioned a bump out at the bottom of the avenue could be helpful. So I think, and I heard from my colleagues, well, that's only the perspective of one member, but she is a member of ADA that uses ADA in our community. And I think it was important to just share that I wanted to make sure that we understood that the solution being proposed could have unintended consequences of making life difficult for some while we're trying to solve the problem. So the way we ended that meeting in July was, were there alternatives that were considered, especially for the top of the avenue in certain areas where the bump outs were being proposed? And I just think there was a lack of transparency from departments, from leadership, and I haven't seen any further from the July meeting till now. I haven't seen any discussion or even attempt to convey if there was any improvement or enhancement. So this is not about any member here not supporting ADA, not having compassion. I know this issue more intimately than many on this board, and I would like nothing than to make life more easier for my closest friend, but I don't think this is the right proposal, and for that reason, I did not support it in July, and do not believe this is the right proposal for our town going forward.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Kalb?
Thank you. Respectfully, sorry? Yeah, okay. Respectfully, I want to make some comments in response to my colleague, Ms. Aurora. Let me just recount how my Republican colleagues on the BET have responded to this ADA issue. The first thing was they cut the amount that was requested for this work almost in half. The second thing is that they conditioned it. The third thing is they refused to release the funds even after the conditions were met. The fourth thing was that they then voted to waste time and money investigating a safe harbor legal path that would allow us not to spend the money to help disabled people gain access to Greenwich Avenue. A wild goose chase that has really come to nothing. So despite these claims that, yes, we're in favor of this, and of course we're compassionate, I see that my colleagues have done everything they can not to spend this money to help the most vulnerable people in our society. And I say that I don't think this reflects the value of our town. It certainly doesn't reflect my values. I mean, the way I grew up was that we look after the most vulnerable people in our town or in our society. It's our obligation, and I respectfully, I also want to say that, personally, my mom had multiple sclerosis. I had to take care of her in a wheelchair throughout my childhood and even into my young adult time. And I can tell you that based on my experience going around the Greenwich Avenue, it would just not have been easy to be able to take care. She certainly couldn't have done it by herself. So I just want to say, I don't think that we want to live in a town that is looking for excuses not to spend money on people who have to get around in wheelchairs, have to get around with canes, that have to, children that have problems getting around. I think it's nonsense. And I also really disagree with armchair engineering and architecture comments. We are not here on this committee. We are not engineers. We are not architects. Second-guessing the work of our expert engineers and architects, I think, is just not appropriate. So I urge all of us to stop this delay and nonsense and to vote in favor of this, and let's put this behind us. I think the town is watching, and I think if we don't take action on this now, I think there's going to be real consequences.
I'd like to take exception to Mr. Kalb's comments about what the Republicans have done here. It's been a diligent examination of facts. It's probably something we should have done more when this item first came before us in the budget hearings. And I think we ought to take it as a lesson learned, and that criticism that you have expressed, I think, is distorting the facts and distorting the position of the Republicans. We are not against ADA. It's clear that the reason we cut the funds was there was plenty of other ADA funds in the budget. We are diligent in examining the cost of everything we do. So I take exception to those comments. Ms. Aurora, would you still like to speak?
Yeah, no, I wanted to share some of that same sentiment in response to Mr. Caleb. I have never raised the issue of legality of what we should and should not do. I believe most of us serve on this board because we're all trying to do the right thing. I did reach out to several of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and had a conversation if they had any concerns, and I think there were shared concerns on particularly at the top of the avenue to see if there were other solutions. Unfortunately, sometimes the way this board is structured, we're not able to even think about, is there a compromise? Is there an alternative solution? So it's not to say that this is not a legal, for me, this is not a legal point of view at all. I think we're all trying to do the right thing. I will say that I have now mentioned a few times that there are low-hanging fruit on the avenue, that certain retail stores are not accessible to people with disability issues, with ADA issues. And I haven't seen a single member from the people that are wanting to support this say, hey, why don't we try and address that while we're doing this? That's spending money, that's solving the problem. So if we're here to solve problems, let's solve problems and not just speak the speak. So again, this is not a legal issue. This is an issue of trying to solve the problem for those who actually need it.
Okay, at this point, there's a suggestion from Ms. Tarkington to call a special meeting or defer this. I think we'll look for a consensus.
Did you make a motion?
No, there was no motion.
I'm happy to make it as a motion. I didn't want to, so do you want it
Well,
as a motion?
If you want to make a motion, you're free to make a motion. I was going to look for a consensus of the board.
However you want to do it, Mr. Chair.
I'd like a show of hands. I mean, I'm happy to call a special meeting if that's the consensus of the board. Could I see a show of hands of people who would like to defer this to a special meeting? Okay. It looks like, unless there's any other comments, we'll proceed to a vote. I'll take a record vote on this. So the motion before us is to release of conditions for PW10 DPW approval to use Greenwich Avenue ADA. Mr. Olczek.
I vote in favor of releasing the funds.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yes.
Ms. Aurora.
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Selps.
Yes.
Ms. Vassiliadis is absent. I'm a yes. Ms. Tarkington.
Abstain.
Ms. Moriarty.
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod.
Yes.
Ms. Jansen.
Abstain.
Mr. Kalb.
Yes.
Mr. Alfano.
Abstain.
Okay, the vote is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor, and that would make it 4 abstentions. 704. Okay, we'll move on to FT2, if
Yes.
you want to read that?
Yes. FD2 for the fire department, an additional appropriation for a replacement engine, and that is for $1,265,000.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Alfano, moved by Ms. Tarkington. Committee reports starting with the Budget Committee.
I'll find my notes again. Sorry about this. So, the fire chiefs, Fire Chief Joe McHugh and Assistant Chiefs Charlie Lubowicki and Justin McCarthy, presented the item explaining that this request was for an appropriation of $1,265,000 for a new engine to replace the one damaged in an accident on Route 95. Chief Lewicki detailed that the department was looking to secure a spot in the assembly line for a replacement engine based on the specifications of an engine expected to arrive in November 2025. So, do we have some good news?
Yeah, I would recognize Charlie to Assistant Fire Chief
I haven't finished my
Lubowicki.
report, but I thought this was a good time for the.
Good time
for
to hear the
news.
good news.
Yes, good morning, members of the board. After long discussions with Pierce Manufacturing, we were able to move up our production date from a delivery in 2028 to hopefully November of 2025, which makes this a much more palatable and easier thing on our side of the logistics part of this.
Wasn't there good news about the price too? Because you're afraid that.
Yes, there will be no additional cost for the extra spot on the line at this time, which is also refreshing.
Yes, terrific news.
Thank you,
Continue
Charlie.
report, please.
Okay, so he highlighted the current challenges in the industry with delivery times that are currently ranging from 43 to 46 months. He described the ongoing efforts to secure an early production slot, which worked, folks. So I think that that's probably,
The vote was?
I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. There was also discussion about how we would pay for the engine, whether we would pay for it upfront, which would result in a discount, bringing the price down, but it sounds like that will not happen. But that could result in some kind of savings. At least that's what they said at the Budget Committee meeting. The committee also inquired about the expected delivery date. There was also discussion about the insurance proceeds and what they would be, and hope that there would be an update with good news on that front for this meeting. So I think that covers most of the key points here. This item, $1,265,000 for a new engine, was approved as a non-routine item by a unanimous vote at the Budget Committee.
Thank you. Any other committees take this up? Do you have any update on the insurance force?
I don't myself. I know that Megan has been working hard with the third party and the insurance company to try to come to an agreement, but I don't have anything at this time on that.
Just to enhance that a little bit, I think the current offer on the table from the insurance company is about $550,000, but Megan is still working hard, as Charlie says, to get this. There's a dispute about whether or not the town has replacement cost or actual value insurance, and there's a whole story behind that, but I don't think we need to go into it here, but, suffice to say, Megan's working very hard and has Gallagher, the insurance broker, on our side. So it's really a dispute with Allianz, the insurance company. Questions?
Just one on that, whether Pete was, I saw you reaching for the mic. Do you have any update on the insurance?
No, since the Budget Committee meeting, we're still at 550. The town is arguing to get replacement value, and the insurance company is offering actual cash value, which is replacement minus depreciation. There's no update since last week. We're still at 550.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I would just make the suggestion, not only pertaining to the fire department, but really throughout the town, that we re-examine all of our insurance policies to determine how they're written and what our coverage really is. Is it based on replacement cost? Is it based on depreciated value? So I think throughout the town, this is sort of a red flag for, just a basic risk management opportunity to reevaluate our entire portfolio of assets and insurance.
I know that there's been a lot of appraisals of buildings done recently, so that's been looked at. What happened here, to explain it a little bit more, is there was a change to the policy without notification. We've traditionally had replacement cost insurance for, I think, 10 years with Allianz without a claim. And all of a sudden, July 1st, it changed with a failure to notify. And you know from your personal, if there's ever a major change to your personal policy, you get a notification. That didn't happen here. So Megan's on it.
I just think that it's an obvious thing to
Yeah.
just, to review everything we have.
Right. Any other comments? Ms. Moriarty?
I just want to follow up on the comment that Ms. Harkington made about the discount if we prepay. Can you tell me the stats?
Yes, so the price that's in front of you, the 1.265, is based on the pricing from the Houston Galveston Cooperative Purchasing Program. However, if we do pay after the funds are approved, or if the funds are approved, we can have a prepayment discount of $147,872, bringing the price to roughly $1,001,001.
Yeah, just thank you for the update. I thought maybe there was some change in that because we're moved up, we're not eligible anymore.
No,
but we're
it's
still
just
eligible.
they call it an interest discount.
And I would still like this board to approve the amount in front of us and let that decision about prepayment be between the controller
No
and
issues
the
with
fire
that.
department.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I
Mr.
can't
Weisbrot?
resist, I can't resist. How are you able to get moved up in the queue?
Just good luck.
Don't ask questions.
We've had a lot of discussions with Pearson Manufacturing, and actually Deputy Chief Eric Maziarz did a lot of the work. He is our apparatus lead, and working with Mike Hanratty, who owns the local Pierce Manufacturing, we were able to show Pierce that having 4 vehicles come in around the same time, 27, 28, it does not help our capital planning in the long run, as well as some other factors, as we have 2 other engines that we're in the process of, or apparatus are in the process of bidding out right now, or having them come up with plans for, and therefore they agreed that customer appreciation maybe, but the end of the day, it was, we already had a vehicle that was approved over 2 years ago that is scheduled to go into production in June, and they said if you build the exact same thing, we could put another one right behind it on the production line, and that's how we came to that.
Okay. Unless there are any other comments, I'd like to move this along. Is there any objection to approval of FD2, the additional appropriation of $1,265,000 for the replacement engine? Seeing none, that's approved at 1100.
So our next.
Yeah, go
Our
ahead.
next item on the agenda is FI1. It's the bonding, for the finance department. It's the bonding resolution for $1,265,000. So I move that.
And I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. FI1, is there a report of the Budget Committee?
Yes.
Maybe just the vote.
So let me just see if there's anything. We will be reducing this, I think, accordingly, won't we? According to what Ms. Moriarty said. So,
No, excuse me,
no.
we're not going to reduce it on the floor today.
oh, no. No, we're approving
We're approving-
$1,265,000.
Right, okay,
What I moved,
okay.
right? But there is a section in here about, so I think
vote.
that the vote on this was 400 to support
Okay.
the bonding resolution for the fire engine.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other committees take this up? Any discussion?
I just want to make comment, spelling error in line 3, so when it goes to the RTM, fix it, replacement is misspelled.
Okay. Any objection to approving this unanimously? Seeing none, this is approved 1100.
Okay, so
We
the
now come to FD1.
FD1 for the fire department, also for the fire department. This is an additional appropriation for maintenance, and the total is $300,000. I move that.
I'll second.
Moved by Tarkington, seconded by Moriarty. The Budget Committee report, please.
So, so Chief, we had all the chiefs continue to be with us, and Chief Lubowicki explained that the request was divided into two amounts of $150,000 each. The first pertained to equipment damaged on Engine 1 during a highway accident. Chief McHugh detailed the extent of the damage, noting that various pieces of equipment, including breathing apparatus and extrication tools, required testing or replacement to meet OSHA and NFPA standards. He emphasized that some hydraulic tools with computer components were severely damaged and not covered under warranty. The second part of the request focused on necessary repairs for Engine 11 and Engine 51, which are currently serving as frontline apparatus while Engine 1 is out of service. These repairs include air conditioning improvements, installation of on-spot chains for traction in light snow, and addressing severe rust issues on the subframe and water cradles. There was some additional discussion, and the Budget Committee approved this 4-0-0.
Thank you. I'll just ask a question of Charlie that I asked him earlier. Is given that the move up of the engine is going to be hopefully the fall of 25 or early 26 put into service, is there still a need to do all the work on the two older engines that are being used as replacement engine ones?
So one of the things that we took into consideration is now those two engines that we were speaking of, Engine 11 and Engine 51, are 20 years old at this point. One we're still going to be needing for probably 3 to 5 years of service. The other one looks like 1 to 1.5 years at this point. If it would please the board, I would say that the 150 for repairs, if you could put a condition on 50,000 of it, I don't think we will need it, but if there's extensive damage on both of the vehicles, it would have to be another conversation. But the idea is that we're going to go to the fleet and we're going to work with our third party, which is Gallant's Knight of Watertown, and they're going to pick whatever the best structural apparatus is to last the 3 to 5 years.
Okay, I don't think we need a condition. I think just sort of the sentiment would be dial it back as much as you can.
Absolutely.
And keep it well within or under budget would be good. Any other questions or comments?
And inform us when you no longer need the amounts so that we can close it
Yeah,
out.
inform the finance department, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, before us, it's been moved and seconded. FD1, the fire department, an additional appropriation for maintenance. Is there any objection to unanimous approval? Seeing none, that's approved 11-0-0. Thank you all. I'm just going to make a quick note on CMS that due to delays at the state level, we're about 4 or 5 weeks behind on bidding the project. The state has a new commissioner in the department reviewing it, the funding, and the person who's assigned to it is also new. So it's dragging out, and I'll send around the RTM report, which I neglected to do earlier. So at this point, I'd like to recognize Ms. Aurora for the investment committee to report on a new member appointment under new business.
Sure. I'll just give a really quick update in the interest of time. First, Morgan Stanley, our new OCIO, came on board August 1st, presented to the IAC on last Wednesday's meeting, September 11th, and we'll be working with Morgan Stanley over the next few months to get the portfolio situated and allocated per the recommendation. Next, the OPEB board, as you all know, has 3 members. Scott Kalb and myself are the Republican and Democrat members on the OPEB board. So there was a third opening, which has been traditionally or more recently historically filled with a member at large. So that member had stepped down on June 30th, 2024, after the expiration of their term. So there was an opening. We had a great candidate, Robert Hardevelt, whose bio I had sent around to everybody on this board. The IAC voted 4-0 to recommend the approval of Robert Hardevelt to fill the opening on the OPEB board. Quickly, Robert has a 40-year career in finance in several businesses across fixed income, leveraged finance, at large investment banks and funds. He also served on several corporate boards and currently serves on several local nonprofit boards, including being a trustee and chairing the endowment at the Greenwich Country Day School. He's a great candidate and has approval from the IAC, so hopefully, I think we have a resolution today. I'm not sure if Pete's going to read it or you want me to read it, to seek the approval from this board.
I could read it.
Yeah, could you read the resolution, please?
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
Resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation appoints Robert L. Harteveld to fill a vacated appointment to a term on the OPEB Trust Board expiring on June 30th, 2027.
Okay, we have a resolution before us on behalf of a committee, so it doesn't really require a motion or a second. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, I'd just like to again commend the Investment Advisory Committee for all the work on OPEB that it's done this year. It's been moved along very well. Thank you. Do we need a record vote on this, Peter?
Yes.
I think we probably should. Okay. I'll take a record vote, starting with Mr. Alfano,
Yes.
Mr. Kalb,
Yes.
Ms. Jansen,
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Fisher's yes. Selps,
Yes.
Ms. Aurora,
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps,
Yes.
and Mr. Alcheck.
Yes.
That's unanimous, 11-0-0. Thank you. So we'll now move to the assessor's report, please. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. Had a fun drive down this morning. Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET. I will be quick. I'd like to present the assessor's report for September 2024. The Board of Assessment Appeals met on September 12th for motor vehicle appeals. They made 84 adjustments. Adjustments on motor vehicles, which was a reduction of $505,000 in assessed value. That basically equals about $5,914 tax loss. It's not a big deal. Personal property declarations, which is for businesses with personal property. We will be sending out the forms on Monday, September 23rd, and they will be due back on November 1st. We resolved 16 appeals since I've been before you last in the tax appeals. We had 3 withdrawn, we had 2 residential settled, and then we had 11 commercial properties settled. So we're actually now down to with 31 tax appeals if you take out the exempt properties. So we're in pretty good shape there. As far as the reval is concerned, we have the award letters have been issued, and we are now working with the legal department to get the contract together. Our date to start the 2025 revaluation will be January 1st of 2025. It will be, I'm sure we'll have the contract signed and executed by then. Anybody have any questions for me this morning?
Any questions? I have one. Could you quantify the tax impact of the Bellhaven decision that we read about recently?
Sure. So we went to pretrial. We were before a judge. We didn't settle this. We were before the judge when we settled this. The town was at $29 million. Their expert was at 17. We resolved the matter at about 27 and change. So we did give them a reduction, a bit of a reduction, but not much. In hindsight, part of our issue this time is the gentleman that actually did our evaluation on Bellhaven, he retired. So we went out and we got another expert. His value actually did support our $29 million, but our allocation was a little bit different. So we ended up reducing one parcel. We reduced one parcel at Bellhaven. They actually own 4. So next time we'll make sure that we get the same. Hopefully we won't have that issue again.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Are you free to say who is going to do, are you separating the residential and commercial
Yeah, we
revals? And are you free to say, or do you need to sign the documents before then?
I think she needs to sign the documents.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
We actually have the same people in place that we did before, that we did in the 2021 revaluation and the 2015. It's going to be the same personnel that are going to be doing our revaluation work, so I feel very comfortable having them come back. Okay?
Anybody else? Could I have a motion to accept the accessories?
I so move.
Moved by Tarkington, seconded by Weisbrod to accept the accessories report. Oh, Alfano, I'm sorry. Can't tell the voice this far away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, 1100. Thank you. Mr. Bernarski for the comptroller and treasurer.
Good morning, everyone. I also will be brief. You all have a copy of the controller's report. I'll answer any questions.
Any questions of the comptroller? Seeing none, could we move the,
So move.
so moved by Tarkington?
Second.
Seconded by Moriarty to accept the comptroller's report. Any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, 1100. The treasurer's report, please.
Okay, we traditionally do not meet in August, so the treasurer usually supplies, which she did, the July and August treasurer's report. You have them before you. Again, I will answer any questions in the treasurer's report.
Any questions? Seeing none, motion to accept
So
by
I-
Tarkington, moved. Weisbrod seconded. Any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, 1100 to accept the treasurer's report. We, in regard to the minutes, we've, Ms. Moriarty and I finally got caught up on this, but I don't think everybody's had a chance to review them. So we will put off approval of the various minutes to our October meeting. I don't have a chair report. I'd take a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's an oversight on 12, second bullet. Are you skipping the approval of the?
Oh, thank you. No, we cannot skip that. Everybody's been provided both by email and in the packet a schedule of dates for the BET meeting, which we need to approve. Could I take a motion to approve the calendar as presented?
I so move.
Moved by Mr. Selps, seconded by Mr. Weisbrod with his consent. Any comments? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Hardiman.
So I'm going to again speak for Ms. Fasciolotis. I know she raised questions about having 2 public hearings and whether there was a better format for that. So I just wanted to make sure, since she's not represented at our meeting today, that that point is raised.
Okay, I don't recall the point being raised, but that's my suggestion, because last year we had about 150 people trying to get into this room. The dominant portion was the schools. I'm harking back to when I served in the 90s. We used to have actually 3 public hearings. I think it was three different decision days in the 90s. But I don't like the town part of the budget getting crowded out by the schools. So hence my choice to have a public hearing for the schools at Central Middle School one night and a public hearing here the second night devoted to the town budget. So I hope it works well.
So I'll just make a comment on that, in terms of dates, that's one thing, but sometimes we have to be flexible. Conference rooms change, et cetera. So to the best of our ability, I think the conference rooms as just suggested are there, but sometimes they
Right.
get changed for reasons that you and I won't
of our
even
control.
consider
That's right.
at this point in time.
Yeah. Samantha has booked all the rooms that are on the schedule so far. So that's good, but every once in a while, something does crowd us out. It happens. So any other comments? Mr. Selps?
Yeah, this is going back, because Ms. Fasciolotis' remarks are being entered into our records, I'd like also my remarks in favor of the project to also be entered and out.
Yeah, actually, I said not to include in the minutes, but if you would like to send them around to the Board of Estimate,
I thought they were being included.
yeah. We're trying to keep the minutes as brief as possible and adhere more to the format of Robert's rules. So the minutes will note that Ms. Facilio, the various people who commented on that item of ADA, but not include the comments. Yeah, Samantha? No, we've pretty much done that. I commented on Central. Oh, Julian Curtis and Old Greenwich. Mr. Selps well, let me deal with the calendar first. Is there any objection to unanimous consent to approve the calendar? Seeing none, that's approved 11:00. Sorry, I skipped over, and thank you, Samantha. The Julian Curtis is moving along well. There is a draft of an RTM report. We realized that we had failed to report to the RTM on a regular basis. So as soon as that, I think it may have been approved by the committee, but as soon as it is, I'll circulate it. Mr. Self circulated a report on the Old Greenwich. Do you have anything to add?
No, as I indicated, that project is moving along. We're at 90% level on the construction drawings. We expect to have a cost estimate by the middle of October, and we expect to be at 100% on construction drawings. As I indicated, the plan has been submitted to the Office of Grant Administration, and we're looking forward to hopefully beginning to review beginning in the month of October. But that committee, led by Mr. Waters, continues to make smooth progress towards construction next summer.
Thank you. Anything else to come before us, or anything else I've missed?
I would simply like to make one comment.
Certainly.
I'd like to commend the chair for running this meeting so efficiently and accommodating very difficult schedules of some of the members. And so for that, I applaud you for doing this well.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Seconded.
So moved by Mr. Alfano, seconded by Mr. Kalb. All in favor, aye? Aye. We adjourned at 9:52. Thank you all.
Well done. Well done.